Don't take it off, just do it. The rancher nevertheless undid it and acted, Wild West. The sun rising over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, brought him a sense of peace he could not find anywhere else. He had grown up on this land, learning to care for the cattle from his father, and then taking over the ranch when the old man passed. The ranch was not large by some standards, but it was enough. It provided him with a steady life, with work to keep his hands busy and his mind focused. Most mornings he would wake up before dawn, tend to the cows, check fences, and make sure the water troughs were full. It was a life of routine, but it was a life he understood. Eli was a man of quiet strength. He didn't speak much, preferring to let his actions do the talking. The townsfolk respected him, not for wealth or charm, but for his reliability and his knowledge of the land. When someone needed help fixing a broken fence, mending a roof, or guiding a lost herd back home, Eli was the first person they would call. Children in town looked up to him with curiosity, watching as he skillfully rode through the plains, his hat pulled low against the sun, his eyes always alert. Yet, for all his outward calm, there was a part of Eli that was restless. A part of him that sometimes wondered if there was more to life than the same routines, day after day. It was during one of these quiet mornings that a young man appeared at Eli's gate. The man was dusty, with clothes worn from travel, and his eyes carried a mixture of hope and desperation. He introduced himself as Jacob, a drifter searching for work and a place to stay for a while. Eli studied him carefully. There was nothing threatening in the man, but the tales of drifters and outlaws in the nearby towns made him cautious. Still, he sensed determination in Jacob's gaze, a spark of ambition that reminded Eli of himself when he was younger. "Looking for work, are you?" Eli asked, his voice calm and even. "Yes, sir. Anywhere. I can ride, I can handle cattle, and I'm willing to learn," Jacob replied, his voice steady despite the weariness in his face. Eli nodded slowly. "You can start with feeding the horses and checking the fences. See how you manage the morning chores, then we'll talk more." As Jacob followed him around the ranch, Eli noticed the way he moved. He was careful but eager, attentive but not overconfident. It was a rare combination in someone so young. The morning passed with the usual tasks, mending a broken section of fence, leading a few restless cows back to the pasture, and inspecting the water troughs to make sure they were clean and full. Eli watched silently, occasionally giving a nod or a small piece of advice. Jacob listened, absorbed every word, and worked without complaint. By the end of the morning, Eli felt a sense of approval. After the chores were done, they sat on the porch of the small farmhouse, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Eli handed Jacob a tin cup of coffee, strong and bitter, and let him rest for a moment. "Most people don't last long on a ranch," Eli said quietly. "It's harder than it looks. You've got to be willing to work before dawn and keep going until after the sun sets. You've got to understand the land and respect it." "I understand, sir," Jacob said. "I want to learn. I want to be better than I was yesterday." Eli nodded, but inside he felt a pang of nostalgia. He remembered his own youth, the days he spent dreaming of adventures beyond the plains, the thrill of hearing stories of faraway towns and daring men. He had once been eager to see the world, to challenge himself against the unknown, but life had a way of keeping him grounded. The ranch needed him. His family had counted on him, and the plains were a world in themselves, full of challenges and rewards if you paid attention. As the day went on, Eli showed Jacob more of the ranch. They rode through the pastures, checking the health of the herd, examining the fences for weak spots, and noting the patches of grass that needed more care. Eli spoke little, but his words carried weight. "The land will teach you if you listen," he said at one point, pointing to a patch of dry grass. "If you ignore it, it will punish you. If you learn from it, it will provide." Jacob nodded, taking in every word. He asked questions about the cattle, about the seasons, about the work that never seemed to end. Eli answered patiently, showing him the techniques that had kept the ranch running smoothly for decades. He could see the curiosity in the young man's eyes, a hunger for knowledge and experience that reminded him of why he had worked so hard all these years. As evening approached, the ranch settled into its quiet rhythm. The cattle were grazing peacefully, the sun cast long shadows across the land, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of dry grass and earth. Eli leaned against the fence, watching Jacob practice lassoing a few stray calves. There was something satisfying about the sight, the young man learning, struggling, and gradually mastering the skill. Eli felt a strange sense of pride, not just in Jacob but in himself. He had built this life from hard work, patience, and respect for the land. But even in this moment of peace, the restless part of Eli whispered to him. He had always told himself, "Don't take it off. Keep what you have. Stay safe." It was a lesson in caution, in valuing the life he had built. And yet the stories Jacob carried, the talk of distant towns and daring adventures, stirred something deep within him. It reminded him of dreams he had set aside, of risks he had not taken, of chances that had passed quietly in the night. As night fell, Eli sat by the small fire outside the farmhouse, Jacob beside him, both looking up at the vast, star-filled sky. The silence of the plains was comforting, but it also spoke to something greater, a world beyond the fences, beyond the familiar paths, waiting for those brave enough to step forward. Eli sipped his coffee slowly, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. He realized that while the ranch was his home, his anchor, there was still a spark within him that yearned to act, to face the unknown. Jacob, noticing the distant look in Eli's eyes, asked softly, "Do you ever think about leaving all this behind, seeing what's out there?" Eli looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He had thought about it countless times, each time pushing the thought away. But now, seeing the young man's curiosity and courage, he felt a strange connection, a reminder that sometimes life demanded action even when it scared you. "Sometimes," he admitted quietly, "sometimes I wonder." The fire crackled as they sat in companionable silence, the plains stretching endlessly before them. Eli felt a mixture of fear and excitement, a tension between the life he knew and the possibilities that lay beyond. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in many years, he felt ready to face it, to act when the moment called for it. As the night deepened, Eli and Jacob finally went inside. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled, and the house smelled faintly of smoke and coffee. Eli lay awake for hours, thinking about the day, the young drifter, and the restless spark inside him. He realized that courage was not just about fighting or daring. It was about choosing to act when the moment required it, even when it was easier to stay safe. And so, on that quiet night in the Wild West, Eli Thompson understood something profound. Life on the plains was steady and safe, but there were times when a man had to step beyond the familiar, face the unknown, and act. The ranch was his home, but the world beyond awaited, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to listen to that restless voice within. The next morning, the plains were alive with the soft light of dawn. Eli Thompson woke to the sound of birds singing and the lowing of cattle in the distance. The day was calm, almost too calm, and that calm made Eli uneasy. There was a tension in the air, a sense that things were shifting. He tried to shake the feeling, focusing on the morning chores, but it lingered like a shadow he could not quite reach. Jacob, now a few days into his work on the ranch, was already busy in the barn. He had learned quickly, proving that he was dependable and willing to follow instructions. Eli watched him from a distance as he fed the horses, brushed down the animals, and stacked hay neatly in the loft. There was a rhythm to the young man's movements, a careful attentiveness that impressed Eli. Despite being a drifter with no experience on this ranch, Jacob was learning fast, and Eli felt a sense of satisfaction. But before the day could settle into its usual pattern, a rider approached the ranch at full speed. Dust rose behind him, and the sound of hooves echoed across the plains. Eli instinctively went to meet the rider, his hand hovering near the holster he rarely used. The rider slowed as he neared the fence, and Eli could see the worry etched across his face. "Mr. Thompson," the rider shouted, jumping off his horse. "It's the gang. Outlaws have been seen near Red Creek. They're moving east and they're dangerous. The townsfolk are scared and some of them are already fleeing." Eli's eyes narrowed. He had heard tales of the outlaws in nearby settlements, men who had no regard for life, property, or law. They moved like shadows, striking quickly and disappearing just as fast. Many towns had tried to resist, but few had succeeded. The news unsettled him, but it also sparked something else, a sense of responsibility he could not ignore. "Thank you," Eli said quietly, his voice steady. "I'll be careful." The rider nodded and quickly mounted his horse, racing back toward town to spread the warning. Eli stood still for a moment, absorbing the information. The plains seemed calm, but he knew better. Danger could arrive suddenly, and hesitation could be costly. He looked toward Jacob, who had stopped his work and was watching Eli expectantly. The young man could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken question hovering between them. What would they do? Eli took a deep breath. For years he had lived by the principle of caution, staying within the boundaries of what he knew, keeping himself and his ranch safe. But this was no ordinary day. The safety of his home, his livestock, and the nearby town was at stake. And now more than ever he realized that courage was not an option, it was necessary. "Jacob," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we need to prepare. Gather the men in town who can help. We're not going to run and we're not going to wait. We'll face this together." Jacob nodded without hesitation. He could see the determination in Eli's eyes, a strength that went beyond fear. He had already learned that Eli Thompson was a man who acted when it mattered most, and now he would follow that example. Together they rode toward town, Eli leading the way, Jacob close behind. The townsfolk were in a state of panic when they saw them approach. People were boarding up windows, loading wagons, and helping children and the elderly find safety. The mayor, a stout man with a worried expression, met Eli as he dismounted. "Mr. Thompson, thank goodness you're here," the mayor exclaimed. "We don't know what to do. They've already robbed 3 settlements to the west. If they reach us, we'll have no chance." Eli listened carefully, asking questions about the gang, their numbers, and their recent movements. He noted the layout of the town, the position of buildings, and the nearby hills that could be used for defense. Every detail mattered. He was not acting recklessly. He was planning, observing, and preparing. "We can set traps and block the main street," Eli said thoughtfully. "The town can't outrun them, but we can make sure they don't reach the center. We'll need every able-bodied man to help, and we'll need to act quickly." The mayor nodded, relief visible on his face. He began calling the townsfolk together while Eli and Jacob started organizing a plan. Some men were sent to guard the entrances, others to hide in buildings that could provide cover. Eli instructed them calmly, giving clear directions, ensuring everyone understood their role. There was fear in the air, but Eli's presence brought a sense of order. People began to follow his lead, finding courage in his confidence. As the sun climbed higher, the tension became almost unbearable. Every shadow, every distant sound made the townsfolk jump, but Eli remained focused. He checked and rechecked the barricades, made sure everyone had weapons ready, and looked toward the hills, where he knew the gang would likely appear. He had faced challenges before on the ranch, dangerous cattle, harsh storms, even wild animals. But this was different. This was human threat, unpredictable and cunning. Yet even as he prepared for the worst, Eli felt a strange sense of calm. He had made a choice. He would not stand by while others were in danger. He would act, and he would act decisively. It was a lesson he had learned in quiet moments on the plains. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Hours passed slowly. The townsfolk waited nervously, their eyes scanning the horizon. Children were kept inside, their mothers whispering reassurances they did not fully feel. Eli walked among the men, giving advice, offering encouragement, and ensuring everyone understood their part. He moved with a quiet authority that inspired confidence. Then in the late afternoon, the dust rose on the horizon. The sound of hooves and shouting carried across the plains, and Eli knew the gang had arrived. They were more than a dozen strong, armed, and ruthless, their eyes scanning the town with cruel intent. The outlaws were confident, perhaps even arrogant, believing that a small town would offer little resistance. Eli took a deep breath and signaled to the men. It was time. He led a small group to a strategic position, hidden by the terrain, where they could observe the gang's movements and strike if necessary. Jacob followed closely, ready to assist in any way he could. The rest of the townsfolk took their positions in the barricades, their fear tempered by the guidance Eli had provided. The first confrontation was tense. A few of the outlaws moved ahead, testing the defenses. Eli and his team waited patiently, letting the gang reveal their intentions. When the outlaws made a mistake, stepping too close to the traps Eli had set, he signaled, and the town's men acted. The sudden resistance startled the gang, who had expected little to no opposition. Shots rang out, horses reared, and dust clouded the streets. Chaos filled the town, but Eli remained calm, directing his people, keeping them focused, and ensuring that no one panicked. Each move was deliberate, each decision calculated. The gang, realizing they faced organized resistance, hesitated, giving Eli and his team the advantage. Through skill, courage, and careful planning, the town slowly gained control of the situation. The gang began to retreat, their confidence shaken by the unexpected strength and determination of the townsfolk. Eli pursued carefully, not recklessly, ensuring that the threat was neutralized without unnecessary risk to his people. By nightfall, the town was safe. The outlaws had fled, their plans foiled by the courage of a rancher who refused to stand idle. The townsfolk emerged from their hiding places, exhausted but grateful. Eli and Jacob rode back to the ranch, the tension slowly leaving their bodies as the stars began to shine in the clear night sky. Eli felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had tested him in ways he had not expected. He had faced danger, organized a defense, and acted decisively. And he had realized something important. Action, when necessary, could make all the difference. He had lived a life of routine and caution, but moments like this proved that courage and planning could protect what mattered most. As they returned home, Jacob glanced at Eli with admiration. "I've never seen anyone act like that," he said softly. "You didn't panic even when things got dangerous." Eli smiled faintly. "It's not about being fearless," he replied. "It's about knowing what matters and being willing to act, even when you're afraid. Sometimes the world gives you a choice. You can wait and hope, or you can act and protect. That choice defines who you are." That night, as Eli sat by the fire, he thought about the day and what it had taught him. The Wild West was full of dangers and unpredictability, but it was also full of opportunities to show courage, protect others, and make a difference. He realized that the quiet life he cherished did not mean avoiding challenges. It meant facing them when they arose, with wisdom, patience, and action. The morning after the town had been saved, Eli Thompson rose before the sun, as he always did. But this morning was different. The events of the previous day had left a mark on him, not a scar of fear but a spark of realization. He had acted decisively, and his actions had saved lives. Yet deep in his chest, he felt a restless energy, a sense that there was still more to do. The threat of the outlaws might have retreated for now, but danger never stayed away for long in the Wild West. and Eli knew that preparation was just as important as action. Jacob was already awake, sweeping the barn floor and humming a tune that had become a sort of ritual for him. The young drifter had proven himself in the battle to defend the town, showing courage and quick thinking that Eli admired. Yet Eli knew that Jacob still had much to learn. Courage alone was not enough in the harsh and unpredictable plains. Knowledge, planning, and strategy were equally important. Eli stepped outside, the cold morning air filling his lungs. He looked across the plains, studying the hills and valleys that surrounded the town. Every slope, every patch of grass, every shadow could be used for advantage, or could hide danger. He knew the outlaws were experienced, cunning men who would not be easily deterred. If they returned, they would come prepared. And so, Eli spent the early hours walking the terrain, memorizing the natural defenses, imagining the paths the outlaws might take, and considering how to use the land to his advantage. By mid-morning, Eli gathered a small group of townsfolk who had proven themselves capable during the previous day's events. He laid out a plan with patience and precision. "We need to act before they return," he said. "We cannot wait for them to strike again. We will use the hills, the fences, and the barns as our allies. Each of you has a role, and each role matters." Some of the men were nervous. They had faced danger before, but the thought of confronting a gang of seasoned outlaws again was frightening. Eli walked among them, placing a reassuring hand on shoulders, offering clear instructions and reminding them of their successes from the previous day. "Fear is natural," he said, "but we are stronger together. We are not acting recklessly, we are acting wisely. Every step we take is calculated, every decision deliberate." Jacob listened intently, absorbing every word. He had always admired Eli's calmness in the face of danger, but today he noticed something deeper, a quiet determination that came not from bravado, but from understanding and experience. Eli was not just leading, he was teaching, showing how courage, strategy, and careful preparation could overcome even the most dangerous adversaries. As noon approached, the group moved out. Eli led them to a ridge overlooking a narrow valley, one of the routes the outlaws would likely use if they returned. From this vantage point, they could see for miles, and they could control the approach. Eli handed out instructions. Some men would remain hidden along the ridge to observe, some would be ready to intercept the outlaws, and others would be positioned to protect the town if needed. The tension in the air was palpable. Each person understood the risk, yet they trusted Eli's judgment. He had earned their confidence through his experience, his calm demeanor, and his unwavering sense of responsibility. He reminded them quietly that the goal was not to fight recklessly, but to protect the town and its people. Every action needed to be deliberate, every decision thoughtful. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, the wind rustling through the grass, the valley below remaining empty. Eli used the time to check the preparations, making sure traps were secure, escape routes were clear, and signals were understood. He walked among the men, offering advice, correcting small mistakes, and encouraging them to stay alert. He could feel the tension building, but he also knew that waiting, observing, and being prepared was part of the strength they had over the outlaws. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, a cloud of dust appeared in the distance. Eli squinted, focusing his eyes, and could make out the shape of men on horseback. The gang had returned, larger than before and moving with caution. Eli's heart beat steadily, his mind alert but calm. The time for planning was over, the time for action had come. Eli signaled to his men, and the ambush was set in motion. The first group of outlaws rode into the valley, unaware of the hidden defenders on the ridges above. Eli's team moved silently, using the terrain to their advantage. Rocks, fences, and natural depressions in the ground became shields, allowing them to approach without being seen. Every movement was deliberate, every decision measured. Jacob followed closely, his eyes wide with focus and determination. He had never faced anything like this before, yet he moved with confidence, trusting Eli's guidance. He understood now that courage alone would not be enough. He needed strategy, observation, and patience. Eli had taught him well, and Jacob was ready to apply those lessons in a real, dangerous situation. The outlaws, confident in their strength and numbers, began to move into the valley, but Eli's team was ready. From the ridge, they signaled to the hidden defenders, coordinating their movements with careful precision. Traps were triggered, forcing the outlaws to slow, hesitate, and reconsider their path. Every delay was a small victory, giving Eli's team the advantage they needed. The first confrontation was tense. A few of the outlaws noticed the defenders on the ridges and opened fire, but Eli's men were prepared, taking cover and returning fire with calculated precision. The air was thick with tension, the sound of hooves, shouts, and distant gunfire echoing across the valley. Eli moved steadily among his men, offering guidance, ensuring no one panicked and keeping the focus on their objective: protect the town and neutralize the threat. As the battle continued, Eli realized something important. This was not about heroism or bravado. It was about responsibility, about using one's skills and knowledge to protect others. Each decision he made, each instruction he gave, had consequences. The lives of his men, the safety of the town, and the future of his ranch were all connected to his ability to act wisely under pressure. Hours passed, and the tide began to turn. The outlaws, unprepared for the level of resistance and the strategic use of the terrain, began to falter. Their confidence waned as they encountered unexpected obstacles and skilled defenders at every turn. Eli observed carefully, directing his team to press the advantage without taking unnecessary risks. Patience and careful planning had given them the upper hand. Jacob proved his courage and skill, helping to intercept a small group of outlaws trying to escape the valley. His movements were quick and deliberate, showing that he had learned the lessons Eli had taught him. Eli watched with pride, knowing that the young man was growing not just as a helper on the ranch, but as a capable and brave individual in his own right. By evening, the gang had been forced to retreat once more. Eli's careful planning, strategic use of the land, and leadership had ensured that the threat was minimized. The town remained safe, the outlaws driven back, and the men who had followed Eli's lead had gained confidence in their own abilities. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the plains, Eli and Jacob rode back to the ranch. The adrenaline of the day slowly gave way to exhaustion, but also a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had faced danger head-on, acted decisively, and emerged victorious, not through reckless courage, but through preparation, strategy, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. That night, as Eli sat by the fire, he reflected on the day's events. He understood more clearly than ever that courage was not about fearlessness. It was about knowing when to act, how to act, and having the wisdom to make the right choices. The Wild West was full of danger and uncertainty, but it was also a place where skill, determination, and careful planning could protect lives and shape the future. Jacob sat beside him, exhausted but attentive. "I didn't think I could do it," he admitted softly. "But watching you, learning from you, it made all the difference." Eli nodded. "Courage alone won't save you. Knowledge, patience, and action together make the difference. You've learned well and you'll keep learning. One day, you'll make your own decisions and protect others the way we did today." The fire crackled as the two men sat in silence, the stars bright above them. Eli felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had acted when it mattered most. The plains were quiet once more, but the lessons of the day remained vivid in his mind. He understood that life in the Wild West was unpredictable, that danger could arrive at any moment, and that the ability to act decisively, wisely, and courageously was the greatest strength a person could possess. And so Eli Thompson, the steady, quiet rancher, had proven to himself and those around him that action, when guided by wisdom and courage, could make all the difference. The day had tested him, pushed him to the limits of his skill and resolve, and shown him that even in the face of danger, a man could protect what mattered most through preparation, strategy, and unwavering determination. The morning air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of the plains. Eli Thompson had barely slept, his mind restless with the knowledge that the outlaws could return at any time. The previous day's encounter had been intense, but it was only a warning. The gang was clever and ruthless, and Eli knew that the final confrontation might be the most dangerous challenge he had ever faced. He rose early, moving quietly around the ranch as the sun began to rise. Jacob was already awake, tending to the horses, his hands steady despite the weariness in his body. Eli appreciated the young man's dedication. Jacob had proven himself reliable in the previous skirmishes, and Eli trusted him completely. Still, Eli knew that courage alone would not be enough. Preparation, strategy, and the careful use of the land were essential if they were to face the gang successfully. After a quick breakfast, Eli gathered the townsfolk who had agreed to help defend the community. Men and women alike, those who had proven their courage before, now stood ready. Eli looked at them, his calm demeanor giving them confidence even as tension filled the air. "Today," he said quietly, "we face them again, but we will not act recklessly. Every step we take is deliberate. Every decision matters. We are here to protect our homes, our families, and our land. Stay alert, trust each other, and act with purpose." The group moved out together, traveling toward the hills overlooking the valley, a place Eli had carefully chosen for its strategic advantage. The terrain was perfect for defense. From this height, they could see the outlaws approaching, and the natural formations provided excellent cover. Eli positioned his team carefully, some men hidden behind rocks, others crouched in the tall grass, and a few stationed near the edges of the ridges, ready to intercept any flanking maneuvers. Jacob followed closely, absorbing every detail. Eli's instructions were precise and calm, but they carried an authority that inspired trust. The young man had learned quickly over the past few days. Courage alone would not suffice, and careful planning could make the difference between success and disaster. Hours passed in tense silence. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying distant sounds that made the men's hearts beat faster. Eli paced quietly, checking positions, observing the valley, and making small adjustments. The outlaws could appear at any moment, and Eli knew that the first few minutes would be critical. Timing, precision, and coordination would determine the outcome. By late afternoon, a faint cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Eli squinted, focusing his eyes, and confirmed what he had feared. The gang was returning, larger and better prepared than before. The outlaws moved with confidence, their horses kicking up dirt as they advanced toward the valley. Eli's heart did not race with fear, but he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came when danger was near. He signaled to his team, using subtle gestures they had practiced. The defenders moved quietly into position, each person understanding their role. Eli reminded them in a low voice, "Patience, wait for the right moment. Let them make the first mistake, then act decisively." The outlaws entered the valley cautiously, unaware of the hidden defenders waiting above them. Eli's plan relied on observation and strategy. From the ridges, he could see every movement, every hesitation, and every opportunity. The gang was confident, but they underestimated the preparedness and skill of those they faced. Suddenly, the first clash occurred. A small group of outlaws approached a narrow passage, stepping into the carefully set traps that Eli had prepared. Nets and tripwires slowed their progress, forcing confusion and hesitation. From the ridges, Eli's men acted quickly, moving to intercept and block the gang's advance. The sound of shouted orders, hooves, and gunfire filled the valley, a chaotic symphony of tension and bravery. Eli moved among his men, guiding, correcting, and encouraging. His presence was steady, a beacon of calm in the chaos. He knew that panic could spread quickly, and his responsibility was to ensure everyone remained focused. Every action was deliberate, every decision thoughtful. The goal was not to fight recklessly, but to protect the town and neutralize the threat with precision. Jacob proved his skill in the midst of the confrontation. He spotted an outlaw attempting to flank the defenders and moved quickly to intercept, using the terrain to his advantage. Eli watched him with pride, seeing the young man act with courage, intelligence, and timing. Jacob had learned well, and his actions contributed significantly to the success of the defense. The gang began to realize that they were facing a coordinated and determined resistance. Their confidence faltered as they encountered obstacles and defenders at every turn. Eli observed carefully, adjusting his strategy as needed, ensuring that his men could press the advantage without taking unnecessary risks. The outlaws, unprepared for the level of planning and skill displayed, began to make mistakes, giving Eli's team even more control over the confrontation. Hours passed with intense focus. The defenders moved with coordination, using the terrain and traps to their advantage. Eli directed the action calmly, his mind alert to every possibility. The outlaws, frustrated and confused, attempted to regroup, but the preparation and strategy of Eli's team kept them on the defensive. Every decision, every move, reinforced the lesson that courage alone was not enough. Careful planning and decisive action were what made the difference. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the gang's morale started to crumble. They had underestimated the defenders' skill and determination. One by one, the outlaws either fled or surrendered, realizing that continuing the fight would only lead to their defeat. Eli remained vigilant, ensuring that no one acted recklessly and that the victory was secured without unnecessary danger to his people. When the dust settled, the valley was quiet once more. The outlaws had been defeated, driven back by a combination of courage, strategy, and determination. Eli's team emerged from their positions, exhausted but triumphant. The townsfolk who had followed his lead felt a renewed sense of confidence in themselves and in their ability to protect their community. Jacob approached Eli, his face tired but filled with admiration. "I didn't know it could be done like that," he said softly. "You didn't just fight, you planned, you waited, you acted when it mattered." Eli nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Courage alone is not enough," he replied. "You have to think, observe, and act wisely. Today was not about bravado. It was about protecting what matters most." That is what makes a difference. The men and women of the town gathered in the valley, their relief palpable. They had faced a dangerous threat and emerged victorious, thanks to the leadership and careful planning of Eli Thompson. The experience had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and shown them that even in the face of danger, bravery guided by wisdom could prevail. As night fell, Eli and Jacob rode back to the ranch, the air filled with the scent of grass and earth, the sky painted with the colors of sunset. They were tired, physically and mentally, but there was a quiet satisfaction in their hearts. They had faced danger directly, acted decisively, and protected the lives of those around them. At the ranch, Eli sat by the fire, reflecting on the day's events. The battle had tested him and his team in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Yet it had also reinforced the lessons he had always believed. Courage was not the absence of fear, and action without thought was reckless. The true strength came from preparation, observation, strategy, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. Jacob sat beside him, exhausted but attentive. "I've learned so much," he said, Not just about defending the town, but about thinking, planning, and acting. You've shown me what it means to be truly courageous." Eli placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Remember this lesson," he said. "The Wild West is full of danger, but it is also full of opportunity. Courage guided by wisdom will always serve you well. Protect what matters, act decisively, and never forget that preparation is as important as bravery." As the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly above the plains, Eli felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The confrontation had tested him like never before, and he had proven to himself and to the town that thoughtful action and courage could overcome even the most dangerous threats. The Wild West was unpredictable, but with determination, planning, and the willingness to act, he had protected what was precious and inspired others to do the same. And in that quiet night, Eli understood something profound. True courage was not about seeking danger or proving oneself. It was about facing it when necessary, protecting others, and making decisions with wisdom, patience, and unwavering resolve. The morning after the confrontation, the Wild West plains were calm again. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. Eli Thompson stood outside his small farmhouse, looking over the land he had worked so hard to protect. The battle with the outlaws was over, the town was safe, and the people who had feared for their lives were now filled with relief and gratitude. But Eli knew that this day, like all days in the West, would leave lessons that went beyond the immediate danger. Jacob, now more confident and composed than ever, joined Eli on the porch. The young drifter had grown quickly under Eli's guidance. He moved with purpose, spoke with clarity, and carried a quiet courage that Eli recognized from his own younger days. The experiences of the past days had shaped him, teaching him not just the skills of survival, but the values of planning, patience, and acting wisely under pressure. Eli spoke softly, as if trying to capture the weight of the lessons in words. "Jacob, the events of the past few days have shown something important. Courage is not the same as recklessness. Acting without thought can destroy lives, but courage guided by wisdom, patience, and careful action, that can change everything." Jacob nodded. "I understand now. You didn't just fight the outlaws, you led everyone, taught them how to act, and kept them safe. That's more important than anything else." Eli smiled faintly. He thought back to the days when he had first taken over the ranch, when the work seemed endless, and the plains felt too wide and too empty for hope to grow. He had learned through experience that strength and wisdom were inseparable. One without the other could not protect what mattered most. And now, after guiding the town through danger, he understood fully that leadership was not about seeking glory, it was about responsibility. By mid-morning, the townsfolk began arriving at the ranch. Many brought gifts of food, fresh bread, or vegetables as small tokens of gratitude. Others simply came to express their thanks, shaking Eli's hand or resting a reassuring hand on Jacob's shoulder. They spoke of the bravery displayed during the confrontation, of the careful planning that had prevented tragedy, and of the courage that Eli had inspired in every one of them. Eli accepted their thanks quietly, deflecting praise with humility. "We all did our part," he said. "Each person here made a difference. I only guided what you were already capable of doing. You all acted bravely, and that is what saved the town." The mayor, who had been coordinating efforts in the town during the attack, approached Eli with a serious expression, tempered by relief. "Mr. Thompson, your actions have saved more than just our town. You've shown people what it means to stand together, to act with courage, and to think carefully before moving. Your leadership has set an example that will not be forgotten." Eli nodded, feeling the weight of the words. Leadership had never been something he sought, yet circumstances had demanded it. He had discovered that true leadership was about observing, guiding, and empowering others to act, not about taking all the credit. The success of the defense had been the result of teamwork, preparation, and courage working together. Jacob, listening to the conversations around him, felt a growing sense of purpose. The young man had arrived at the ranch seeking work and a place to stay, but he was leaving with lessons that would shape the rest of his life. He had seen firsthand how careful planning, quick thinking, and courage could protect lives. He had witnessed how one man's calm determination could inspire an entire community to act bravely, and he had learned that action without thought was dangerous, while thought without action was powerless. As the day progressed, Eli returned to his routine on the ranch. He inspected fences, checked on the cattle, and tended to the horses. Yet, even in the midst of ordinary tasks, he reflected on the events of the past days. The battle with the outlaws had tested him, but it had also reminded him of why he had chosen this life in the first place: to protect, to work, and to live in harmony with the land he loved. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Eli and Jacob rode along the edge of the plains. The land stretched endlessly before them, quiet and still after days of chaos. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying a scent of earth and freedom. Eli spoke quietly, sharing his thoughts. "You see, Jacob," he said, "life on the plains is unpredictable. Danger can come when you least expect it, but it is also full of opportunities to protect, to teach, and to make a difference. The key is knowing when to act and how to act wisely." Jacob listened intently. "I think I understand, sir. You didn't just defend the town, you taught everyone, including me, how to face danger without panic. That's something I'll never forget." Eli nodded. "Exactly. Courage without wisdom is useless, and wisdom without courage is meaningless. When they come together, that is when a man can truly make a difference." As night fell, the ranch grew quiet. The cattle settled, the wind whispered through the plains, and the stars shone brightly above. Eli sat by the fire outside the farmhouse, reflecting on what had transpired. He thought of the townsfolk, of the outlaws, and of Jacob, who had become more than just a helper. He had become a companion, a young man learning to carry courage with wisdom. Eli realized that his life had changed subtly but profoundly. He had always valued the quiet rhythm of the ranch, the safety of routine, and the predictability of daily work. But the events of the past days had shown him that life demanded more at times. Action was necessary, responsibility unavoidable, and courage essential. He had acted when needed, guided others, and faced danger directly. And through it all, he had learned that courage, strategy, and calm determination could protect what mattered most. Jacob sat beside him, gazing at the stars. "Do you think the outlaws will come back?" he asked softly. Eli considered the question carefully. "Perhaps," he said, "but if they do, we will be ready. And even if we aren't, we know now how to act wisely, how to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and how to face challenges without fear. That knowledge is stronger than any threat." The young man nodded, understanding more deeply than ever what it meant to act with courage guided by wisdom. Eli smiled, feeling a quiet pride not in himself, but in the lessons passed on, in the strength he had nurtured in others. The following weeks were peaceful. Life on the ranch returned to its normal rhythm, but something had shifted. The townsfolk treated Eli with renewed respect, not out of fear, but out of admiration for his courage and leadership. Jacob continued to work on the ranch, learning and growing, his confidence and skill increasing with each passing day. And Eli, while returning to the steady routine of ranch life, carried a deeper understanding of what it meant to act decisively, responsibly, and with courage. In the quiet moments, Eli reflected on the events that had brought them to this point. The Wild West was unpredictable, full of dangers both small and great. Yet it was also a place where courage, wisdom, and preparation could protect lives, inspire others, and shape the future. He realized that while he had once thought of his life as quiet and safe, true fulfillment came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with thought, bravery, and determination. As the sun set on the horizon, Eli stood on the porch, looking out over the plains. The land stretched endlessly, calm and beautiful. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, that danger would always be present, and that the lessons of the past days would be called upon again. But he was ready. He had acted when it mattered most, guided others through danger, and protected what was precious. And in doing so, he had discovered a truth that would remain with him forever. Courage guided by wisdom, and action taken with purpose, could shape the world and protect what truly mattered. Eli turned to Jacob, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Remember this, Jacob," he said. "The world will test you often when you least expect it, but when the moment comes, act with courage, act with wisdom, and always protect what matters most. That is what defines a man." Jacob nodded, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "I'll remember, sir, always." And as night fell over the Wild West plains, Eli Thompson sat quietly, listening to the wind, feeling the rhythm of the land, and knowing that he had done what was right. The town was safe, the people were inspired, and the lessons of courage, wisdom, and action would endure, not just in his memory, but in the lives of those he had guided and protected. The ranch was more than a home. It was a place of learning, growth, and strength. And Eli knew, with a quiet certainty, that no matter what challenges the future might bring, he and those he had inspired would face them together, guided by courage, wisdom, and the steadfast knowledge of what truly mattered.